In the biting chill of an early autumn evening, Mia Thompson stood hesitantly outside the looming silhouette of a deserted church on the outskirts of town. The wind tugged at her threadbare coat, its fabric worn thin from months of relentless use, and the cold seeped into her bones, making her shiver uncontrollably. Her hands hovered protectively over her heavy belly, swollen with the life growing inside her, a constant reminder of both hope and vulnerability. The church's weathered stone facade bore the scars of neglect. Cracks spiderwebbed across the once pristine walls, and the wooden doors sagged on rusted hinges, groaning softly as the wind nudged them. It was not a place one would expect refuge, yet for Mia, it was the only option left. Just days before, the fragile threads that tethered her to security had unraveled completely. She remembered the sharp sting of her manager's voice as she was let go without warning. The abruptness of the eviction notice slipped under her apartment door, and the hollow ache when Mark, the man she once trusted, vanished after hearing the news of her pregnancy. Each loss had chipped away at her sense of stability, leaving her adrift in a world that had grown increasingly cold and unwelcoming. Mia had wandered the streets aimlessly, clutching a small bag that held the few belongings she'd managed to salvage. Some worn clothes, a faded photograph of her mother, and a battered book of poetry that had once offered solace during darker days. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. Her footsteps faltered as she reached the church's entrance, the heavy wooden doors looming like a barrier between despair and a sliver of hope. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and decayed wood, a testament to years of abandonment. Still, the silence that wrapped around the building was oddly inviting, a stark contrast to the chaos that roiled inside her. She hesitated for a moment, heart pounding, before summoning the courage to push the door open. The hinges protested with a long, low creak, and a gust of stale air greeted her, carrying with it the faintest whisper of forgotten prayers. Inside, the church was cloaked in shadows, the fading light filtering through shattered stained glass windows, casting fractured hues across the dust-laden pews. The floor was strewn with debris, fallen plaster, brittle leaves tracked in by the wind, and the air held a heavy stillness that pressed against Mia's lungs. She took tentative steps forward, each footfall muffled by years of neglect, her eyes adjusting to the dimness. The altar, once the heart of the sanctuary, stood solemn and bare, its white paint chipped and peeling. Despite the decay, a strange sense of calm wrapped around her, as if the building itself recognized her desperation and offered silent comfort. Mia's mind reeled back to the moment she had first lost everything. It had begun with a single phone call, her employer informing her that budget cuts meant her position was terminated immediately. The news hit like a punch to the gut, leaving her reeling and scrambling for answers that never came. Without a job, rent was impossible to pay, and eviction followed swiftly. The day she packed her meager belongings, Mark's absence was a gaping wound. He had left a note, cold and brief, claiming he couldn't handle the responsibility, that Mia had to face the consequences alone. The weight of abandonment pressed down on her chest, nearly suffocating in its intensity. Now, with nowhere else to go, the church was her last refuge. Settling onto the cold stone floor near the back pews, Mia wrapped her coat tightly around her belly, drawing a shaky breath as her muscles relaxed just enough to allow exhaustion to creep in. The ache in her lower back reminded her of the life inside her, a tiny but fierce presence that demanded protection. Hunger gnawed at her, but more pressing was the fear of the unknown, of the cold night ahead, of giving birth alone in a place forgotten by time. tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away, unwilling to let despair claim her completely. She scanned the interior once more, taking in the peeling murals and the remnants of what must have been vibrant worship. Bit by bit, fragments of a life once lived here whispered through the silence. The faint echo of hymns, whispered confessions, the steady cadence of prayers offered in hope and desperation. Mia imagined the church in its prime, filled with light and warmth, a sanctuary not just of faith, but of community. Now, it was a hollow shell, much like herself, waiting for a spark to bring it back to life. Despite the cold and the emptiness, a small ember of hope flickered within her. The church, abandoned and forgotten, had become a metaphor for her own existence, worn down by hardship yet standing, still capable of sheltering life. She pressed her hand against the rough stone wall, feeling its cool solidity, grounding herself in the present moment. For the first time since losing everything, she allowed herself to believe that survival was possible. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the broken windows and stirring loose leaves into swirling eddies. Mia pulled her coat tighter, her breath visible in the chilly air. She knew the night would be long and filled with uncertainty. But within the shadowed walls of the church, she found a fragile refuge, a place where she could rest, gather strength, and perhaps find a way forward. As the last light faded from the sky, she closed her eyes briefly, whispering a silent prayer for the child she carried, for the strength to endure, and for the sanctuary that had unexpectedly opened its doors to her in her darkest hour. The night deepened around the old church, its silence broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through broken glass and the distant hum of a city that had long since turned its back on this forgotten corner. Inside, Mia Thompson curled into herself on the cold stone floor, wrapping her threadbare coat tighter around her swollen belly as if sheer will could stave off the creeping chill. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her limbs, but sleep remained elusive, chased away by the gnawing ache of hunger and the relentless anxiety that clung to her like a second skin. Days had passed since she lost her job, a sudden and merciless blow that shattered the fragile stability she had clung to. The eviction notice had come swiftly after, turning the small apartment she once called home into a memory packed away in a battered duffel bag. Mark's absence was a fresh wound, the silence left in his wake louder than any argument, any accusation. Alone and penniless, Mia had wandered the streets, her footsteps aimless, her heart heavy with the dread of what lay ahead. Without family or friends to turn to, her options dwindled to nothing, and the cold truth settled in. She was utterly alone. Her body ached in ways she hadn't anticipated. The pregnancy, now well into its final trimester, brought with it a tide of physical hardships. The sharp pangs in her back, the swelling in her feet, the relentless nausea that no amount of water or rest could soothe. Hunger gnawed at her belly, a cruel echo of the life growing inside, demanding nourishment she could no longer provide. The cold seeped into her bones, the damp air of the abandoned church chilling her skin through the thin fabric of her coat and the threadbare layers beneath. Yet, despite it all, Mia had stumbled upon the church, a relic of another time, standing silent and empty on the outskirts of town. Its dilapidated state mirrored her own battered spirit, but within its walls she sensed a faint glimmer of sanctuary. The eerie emptiness was strangely comforting compared to the harshness of the streets. She had pushed open the heavy wooden doors, braced herself against the cold stone floor, and allowed herself a momentary reprieve from the relentless storm outside. The church's interior was a cavern of shadows and dust, the broken stained glass windows filtering the moonlight into fractured patterns that danced across the floor. Rows of empty pews stretched before the altar, their wood splintered and worn, but still standing, a testament to endurance in the face of decay. Mia traced her fingers along the rough edges of a pew, finding a small measure of grounding in the tactile sensation. Her breath came in shallow gasps, the weight of impending motherhood pressing down on her with terrifying certainty. She tried to settle her racing thoughts, focusing on the rhythmic rise and fall of her breath, on the quiet heartbeat she could feel beneath her palm. The fear of giving birth alone gnawed at her, a shadow lurking just beyond the flickering candlelight of her hope. The absence of healthcare, the lack of any support network, the barest of resources, all compounded into a mounting dread that threatened to unravel her resolve. She knew the risks, the dangers of isolation in this fragile state. Yet there was nowhere else to turn. Drawing her knees close to her chest, Mia closed her eyes and let the silence envelop her. Memories flickered through her mind. Her mother's warm hands, the comforting embrace of a family long since fractured, the laughter of friends now distant echoes. None of those lifelines remained, and the cold truth of abandonment pressed in from all sides. But beneath the fear, a stubborn ember of determination flickered. This child, this tiny life she carried, was reason enough to endure, to fight against the odds stacked so cruelly against her. Hours passed in a blur of restless shifting and whispered prayers. Hunger gnawed relentlessly, but the only food she had was a stale granola bar, its crumbs barely touching the emptiness within. Thirst parched her throat, but the water bottle she clutched was nearly empty, rationed carefully to stretch through the night. The church's stillness was broken only by the distant howl of a stray dog and the occasional drip of water from a cracked pipe somewhere in the shadows. In the dim light, Mia's gaze drifted upward to the shattered stained glass windows, their colorful fragments catching the moonlight in a fractured mosaic. Despite their broken state, the windows still held beauty, a reminder that even in ruin, there could be light. She allowed herself to imagine the church as it once was, filled with warmth, with voices raised in song, with hands joined in hope and prayer. That vision was a balm to her weary soul, a promise that even in the darkest places, sanctuary could be found. But the reality was stark. This church, abandoned and forgotten, was her refuge not by choice, but by necessity. The cold stone beneath her was unyielding, the draft seeping through cracks in the walls chilling her to the core. The ache in her back grew sharper with every passing hour, a relentless reminder of the life inside and the trials still to come. Mia shifted her position, wincing as the strain tugged at her muscles, but forced herself to remain still, conserving what little energy she had left. Her mind wandered to the future, a landscape as uncertain as the night that enveloped her. Where would she go when dawn broke? Who would she turn to once the fragile shelter of the church was no longer enough? The questions spiraled without answers, a storm of doubt and fear that threatened to consume her. Yet, beneath the turmoil, a fragile thread of hope persisted. She was still here, still breathing, still fighting. As exhaustion finally began to claim her, Mia allowed herself a moment to imagine the child she carried. A small, perfect life, yet to enter a world that had been unkind to its mother. She whispered a silent promise to protect this unborn soul, to find a way through the darkness, no matter the cost. The church, with all its decay and silence, had become more than just a refuge. It was a crucible where her resolve was forged anew. The night stretched on, long and unforgiving. But within the cold embrace of the deserted church, Mia found a fragile sanctuary. It was imperfect, uncertain, and perilous. Yet it was hers for this moment, a place to rest, to gather strength, and to prepare for the unknown journey that awaited beyond the broken doors. With a final shiver, she closed her eyes, clutching her coat tighter, and let the stillness carry her into a fitful sleep. The whispered prayers of the forgotten church mingling with her own quiet hopes. When dawn's pale light slipped through the fractured stained glass, casting muted colors across the dust-laden pews, Mia stirred from a restless sleep. The cold stone floor beneath her had offered little comfort, and her body ached more acutely with the morning's arrival. Yet, despite the chill and discomfort, a strange sense of calm had settled over her. A quiet acceptance that this broken place, abandoned and silent, had become her fragile sanctuary. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the shattered panes, Mia's eyes drifted across the church's interior, taking in the worn features she had only glimpsed in the dimness the night before. The altar, chipped and faded, stood quietly at the front, a relic of faith and hope long since dulled by time. Her gaze wandered to the surrounding pews, their wood splintered and scarred, and then to the shattered windows, where shards of colored glass caught the light in scattered glimmers. Drawn by an impulse she couldn't explain, Mia rose slowly to her feet, the weight of her pregnancy making each movement deliberate and careful. She moved toward the altar, her footsteps tentative against the cold floor, the silence of the space wrapping around her like a shroud. The church was still and empty, yet in its stillness was a profound sense of history, a presence that whispered of lives and stories long since past. As she approached the altar, something caught her eye. A faint glimmer beneath the worn wooden steps that led up to it. Curiosity stirred within her, a fragile spark in the midst of her exhaustion and fear. Kneeling down, Mia brushed away layers of dust and cobwebs, revealing a small wooden box, locked tight and coated in the grime of years. The box was nondescript, its surface scarred and faded. But to Mia, it was a beacon of mystery in an otherwise desolate place. Her fingers trembled as she searched the surrounding area for something to pry it open. Spotting a loose nail lying nearby, she carefully wedged it beneath the box's lid. The lock resisted at first, but with gentle persistence, the lid creaked open, releasing a small cloud of dust into the still air. Inside, Mia found a trove of forgotten treasures. A bundle of old letters tied with a faded ribbon, a yellowed photograph, and a delicate piece of hand-stitched cloth, its embroidery frayed but intricate. Her breath caught as she lifted the letters, the paper brittle beneath her fingertips. The handwriting was elegant, looping and precise, a stark contrast to the harsh realities Mia now faced. She unfolded the first letter with reverence, reading the carefully penned words that spilled across the pages in faded ink. The letters spoke of hope and hardship, of loneliness and courage, penned by a woman named Grace who had lived decades ago. Grace's words resonated deeply with Mia. They spoke of a difficult pregnancy marked by isolation and fear, of nights spent alone in a world that offered little compassion. But beneath the pain and uncertainty, there was a steadfast determination to endure, to protect the life growing within. The letters unfolded a story of quiet strength, of a woman who had faced adversity with a courage that mirrored Mia's own. The faded photograph was a stark contrast to the written words, a black and white image of a woman standing outside the very church Mia now inhabited. Grace's gaze was steady and resolute, her posture proud despite the worn clothing and humble surroundings. The photograph captured a moment frozen in time, a testament to a life lived with quiet dignity amidst hardship. Mia's fingers traced the edges of the hand-stitched cloth, marveling at the delicate craftsmanship. The embroidery depicted a small bouquet of wildflowers, their colors muted but still vibrant against the aged fabric. It was a tangible connection to Grace's world, a piece of her story preserved through the years. The cloth seemed to carry a silent message, a reminder that beauty and hope could endure even in the harshest conditions. As Mia absorbed the contents of the box, a profound sense of connection blossomed within her. Here, in this forgotten sanctuary, she had uncovered a link to the past, a story of a woman who had walked a path not unlike her own. The discovery stirred something deep inside Mia, a flicker of hope that transcended time and circumstance. Grace's courage became a whisper of strength in her own heart, a reminder that she was not alone in her struggles. The morning light grew stronger, illuminating the church's worn features and casting long shadows across the floor. Mia sat back on her heels, clutching the letters to her chest, tears blurring her vision. The weight of her loneliness seemed to lift, replaced by a fragile resolve. Grace's story was a beacon, a testament to the resilience of women who had faced hardship and emerged with their spirits intact. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the remnants of a forgotten past, Mia found a renewed sense of purpose. The church was no longer just a shelter from the cold. It was a bridge between generations, a place where stories of survival and hope intertwined. She felt a stirring within her, a determination to honor Grace's legacy, to carry forward the strength that had been passed down through the pages of those fragile letters. With gentle hands, Mia carefully repacked the box, securing the ribbon around the letters once more. She placed the photograph and the embroidered cloth atop the bundle, a silent promise to preserve the memory of the woman who had come before her. Rising to her feet, she looked around the church with new eyes, seeing not decay, but potential, not emptiness, but possibility. Though the challenges ahead remained daunting, the hunger, the cold, the looming uncertainty, Mia felt a small but steady flame of hope burning within her. The discovery of Grace's story had shifted something fundamental, anchoring her in a lineage of resilience and courage. It was a reminder that even in the darkest places, connections could be found, and that the strength to endure often came from the most unexpected sources. As the morning sun climbed higher, warming the church's stone walls, Mia settled back onto the cold floor, the box resting beside her like a talisman. She folded the letters carefully once more, tracing the words in her mind as if committing them to memory. The sanctuary, once silent and empty, now held the echoes of two women, one lost to history, the other fighting for a future. The fragile light filtering through the broken windows seemed to bless this quiet communion, filling the space with a sense of possibility. Mia closed her eyes and breathed deeply, drawing strength from the discovery, from the past, and from the life she carried within. The church had revealed its secret, and with it, a glimmer of hope flickered in the heart of a woman who refused to be broken. The fragile morning light filtered softly through the cracked, stained glass, casting fractured hues across the dust-covered floor of the abandoned church. Mia sat cross-legged near the altar, the wooden box carefully placed before her like a sacred relic. The letters lay spread gently across her lap, their faded ink revealing the story of Grace, an echo of a woman who had once faced the very fears and hardships now entwined with Mia's own life. As she read the delicate script, Mia's heart tightened with recognition. Grace's words were raw and honest, filled with the ache of loneliness and the uncertain hope that had carried her through a difficult pregnancy decades ago. The letters told of nights spent in quiet desperation, of a world that seemed indifferent to her suffering, and of the fierce determination to protect the child growing within her, even when the future looked bleak. Mia's fingers trembled as she traced the looping handwriting, each word a bridge between two women separated by time but united in experience. Grace spoke of the isolation of carrying life alone, the whispers of judgment from a society that offered little compassion to women like them. Yet, beneath the pain, there was a quiet strength that resonated deeply with Mia, a courage born not of circumstance, but of necessity. The letters revealed moments of tenderness and fear, of whispered prayers and stolen moments of joy amidst hardship. Grace wrote of the small comforts she clung to, a worn shawl against the cold, the kindness of a passing stranger, the faint hope that one day her child would know a better world. Her words painted a portrait of resilience, a testament to the unyielding bond between mother and child. Mia felt the weight of Grace's story settle within her, mingling with her own fears and hopes. The parallels were undeniable. The loneliness, the uncertainty, the desperate search for shelter and safety. It was as though Grace's spirit reached across the years, offering a silent hand to steady Mia's trembling resolve. The discovery was more than a connection to the past. It was a lifeline. Tears blurred Mia's vision as she folded the letters, her breath catching in her throat. The overwhelming sense of empathy stirred a fierce protectiveness for the woman who had penned these words and for the child she carried. For the first time in weeks, Mia felt less alone. Grace's courage became a mirror, reflecting back the strength Mia had yet to fully recognize in herself. Clutching the embroidered cloth, its delicate stitches worn but vibrant, Mia imagined the hands that had crafted it, weaving hope into every thread. It was a tangible link to Grace's life, a symbol of care and love amidst adversity. The cloth seemed to carry the warmth of a mother's embrace, a silent promise that even in the darkest moments, love endured. The church itself, once a place of worship and refuge, now held a new significance. It was not just a shelter from the cold night, but a sanctuary where stories of strength and survival intertwined. Mia looked around the quiet space, the peeling paint and broken windows no longer symbols of decay, but of endurance. The sanctuary had borne witness to countless lives, and now it bore witness to hers. As the day wore on, Mia found herself drawing strength from Grace's words. Each letter became a source of encouragement, a reminder that the path she walked was not hers alone. The shared struggles bridged the gap between past and present, weaving a tapestry of resilience that spanned generations. It was a story of women who had faced the world's indifference and yet refused to be broken. The realization stirred a quiet fire within Mia. She was not merely surviving. She was carrying forward a legacy of courage and hope. Grace's story was a beacon, illuminating the darkness that had threatened to consume her. With every breath, Mia felt her resolve harden, a determination to protect the life within her and to honor the strength of those who had come before. In the stillness of the abandoned church, a new purpose took root. Mia envisioned a future where the sanctuary could once again offer refuge, not just for herself, but for others like her. The thought brought a flicker of comfort amid uncertainty, a fragile hope that life could emerge from the shadows of despair. Despite the lingering fears, the hunger, the cold, the isolation, Mia allowed herself a moment of grace. She whispered a quiet promise to her unborn child to carry them safely through the trials ahead. The connection to Grace's story fortified her spirit, transforming fear into resolve and solitude into solidarity. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the floor, Mia gathered the letters and cloth, tucking them carefully back into the wooden box. The weight of the past rested gently in her hands, a sacred trust she vowed to protect. Rising slowly, she felt a renewed sense of purpose settle within her, a flame kindled by the courage of a woman who had once walked this same path. The church, silent and weathered, had become a vessel of stories, a testament to the endurance of women bound by struggle and hope. Mia stepped toward the broken windows, the fading light casting a soft glow on her face. Within her, the legacy of Grace lived on, a quiet strength, a shared determination, and a promise that even in the darkest moments, hope could be found. In the quiet stillness of the abandoned church, Mia clutched her phone with trembling hands, the dim screen casting a pale glow over her weary face. The fragile connection to the outside world felt both tenuous and vital, a lifeline to the past and a bridge toward the understanding. She had spent the morning poring over Grace's letters, the echoes of a woman's courage resonating deeply within her. But now she needed to know more. Who was Grace? What had become of her? And how did her story intertwine with this forgotten sanctuary? With cautious fingers, Mia began typing, searching for any trace of Grace's name within the tangled web of history and memory. The initial results were sparse, just a few mentions buried in obscure archives and faded newspaper clippings. But as she delved deeper, a clearer picture began to emerge. Grace had been a midwife in the community decades ago, a quiet pillar of support for women who had nowhere else to turn. The discovery struck a chord. Grace was not just a solitary figure lost to time. She had been a beacon of hope for others, offering care and compassion in an era when society often turned its back on women like her. Mia's heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow, recognizing in Grace a kindred spirit who had faced hardship with unwavering strength. As she scrolled through the faded records, Mia found references to Grace's work during a time when unwed mothers were stigmatized and marginalized. The church, it seemed, had once served as a refuge for these women, a sanctuary where they could find shelter and support away from the harsh judgment of the outside world. Grace had been at the heart of this mission, her hands delivering new life in the shadow of societal rejection. The more Mia uncovered, the more the pieces of the past fell into place. Grace's efforts had been quietly heroic, providing care when no one else would. But as the decades passed, the church's role faded from memory, its walls falling into disrepair as the community's priorities shifted. Grace's legacy, once vibrant and vital, had been buried beneath years of neglect and silence. Mia felt a surge of determination swell within her. The echoes of Grace's past stirred something deep, a call to honor the woman who had given so much in a time of need. She imagined the countless lives Grace had touched, the mothers and children who had found safety in the church's embrace. It was a history worth reclaiming, a story that deserved to be told. Her own struggles took on new meaning in this light. The church was more than a shelter for a desperate night. It was a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of compassion in the face of adversity. Mia's resolve strengthened as she realized that she was not alone in her journey. Grace's story was a reminder that, even in the darkest moments, there were those who had fought to create light. With the phone still in hand, Mia began reaching out to local historians and community members who might know more about Grace and the church's past. She sent messages filled with questions and hope, eager to connect with anyone who could help piece together the forgotten chapters of this story. The response was slow at first, but soon fragments of memories and anecdotes began to trickle in. Stories passed down through generations, whispers of a woman whose kindness had left an indelible mark. One message came from a woman named Eleanor, who recalled her grandmother speaking of Grace as a guardian angel in their town, someone who had provided care and comfort when the world offered none. Another shared a faded photograph of the church bustling with life. Women gathered in its halls, children playing in its courtyard. A stark contrast to the silence Mia now knew so well. Each new revelation deepened Mia's connection to grace and the church. The sanctuary that had once been a beacon of hope was not lost to time, but waiting to be reborn. The thought sparked a fragile hope within Mia, a vision of a place where women like her could find support and strength, just as Grace had once offered. Amidst her research, Mia found herself reflecting on the enduring power of legacy. Grace's life had been marked by quiet acts of courage and kindness, ripples that extended far beyond what she could have imagined. It was a reminder that even in the face of hardship and invisibility, one person's compassion could change the course of many lives. Mia's own hardships felt less isolating now, woven into a tapestry of shared struggle and perseverance. The church, with its cracked walls and broken windows, stood as a silent witness to both past and present, a place where history and hope converged. She envisioned restoring it, breathing new life into its sacred spaces and reclaiming its purpose as a refuge for those in need. As the day waned, Mia carefully saved the information she had gathered, her fingers steady despite the weight of exhaustion. She folded Grace's letters once more, tucking them into the wooden box alongside the photograph and embroidered cloth. The tangible pieces of the past rested gently in her hands, a sacred trust to be honored and preserved. For the first time since her ordeal began, Mia allowed herself a flicker of optimism. The discovery of Grace's story and the church's forgotten role gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She was not merely surviving. She was becoming a part of something greater, a continuum of women who had faced adversity and chosen compassion. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the church's worn floor, Mia settled onto the cold stone once again. The weight of history and hope balanced quietly within her. The sanctuary held its breath with her, a place waiting to be awakened, to become a beacon once more. And in that moment, Mia felt the stirrings of a future shaped by the strength of those who had come before, and the promise of those yet to come. The fading light of late afternoon filtered through the cracked, stained glass, casting fractured rainbows across the worn stone floor of the abandoned church. Mia moved slowly through the empty nave, the weight of her pregnancy pressing against each cautious step. Her fingers trailed along the roughened wood of the pews, tracing the splintered edges as if seeking a connection to the lives that had once filled this place with warmth and purpose. The discovery of Grace's story had ignited something within her, a determination to understand not just the woman, but the sanctuary that had sheltered so many before. At the far end of the church, beneath the peeling paint of a faded mural, she found a small alcove filled with dusty ledgers and brittle photographs, stacked haphazardly on a crumbling shelf. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and time, a tangible testament to years of neglect. With care, Mia lifted the oldest of the records, its pages yellowed and fragile, revealing handwritten entries chronicling the church's history: baptisms, weddings, funerals, and, more poignantly, notes about women who had sought refuge within its walls. As she leafed through the documents, a portrait of the church's forgotten role began to emerge. Decades ago, this sanctuary had been more than a place of worship. It had been a haven for pregnant women facing hardship, a place where judgment was replaced by compassion. The ledgers detailed names and dates, stories glimpsed in the margins, notes about women who had arrived with little more than hope and fear, cared for by Grace and others who had dedicated themselves to offering shelter and support. Mia's breath caught as she read an entry describing a woman named Anna, who had come seeking solace from a life marked by poverty and abandonment. The note spoke of Grace's kindness, her tireless efforts to provide comfort and care when the world outside had turned cold. The church had been a refuge, a place where women could find safety, dignity, and a measure of peace amid turmoil. The photographs told a similar story. Black and white images captured moments of quiet resilience. Women gathered in the church's modest kitchen, hands joined in prayer, a cradle rocked gently in a sunlit corner. Children played on the church steps, their laughter frozen in time, a stark contrast to the silence that now hung heavy in the air. These fragments of memory painted a picture of a community bound by empathy and strength, united in the shared struggle of motherhood and survival. But as Mia dug deeper, she uncovered the painful reasons for the church's decline. Changing societal attitudes, the rise of institutional care, and the stigma attached to unwed mothers had gradually eroded the sanctuary's purpose. The ledgers became sparse, the photographs fewer and more faded, until the record stopped altogether. The church had fallen into disuse, its mission overshadowed by the shifting tides of history and prejudice. Maya felt a profound sadness wash over her. The sanctuary that had once been a lifeline for so many had been abandoned, left to crumble alongside the lives it once touched. Yet, beneath the sorrow, a spark of resolve ignited. The forgotten stories demanded to be heard, the legacy of compassion needed to be reclaimed. She paused by a cracked window, watching the sun dip low, casting long shadows across the peeling walls. The church, despite its decay, still held the echoes of those who had sought refuge within its embrace. Mia imagined the women who had come before her, their fears, their hopes, their quiet acts of bravery. The realization settled deep within her. This place was not just a building, but a testament to resilience, a beacon waiting to be rekindled. Drawing from Grace's courage and the sanctuary's history, Mia made a quiet vow. She would not let this place be forgotten again. The church would rise once more as a refuge, a community where women facing hardship could find support and strength. The task ahead was daunting, but the legacy of those who had walked these halls before her was a call she could not ignore. As twilight deepened, Mia explored further, finding a small room off the main hall that had once served as a nursery. The faded wallpaper peeled in strips, and a broken cradle lay abandoned in the corner. Yet, even in its ruin, the space held a sacredness, a place where new life had been welcomed amidst uncertainty. She touched the cradle gently, feeling the weight of generations carried here, the whispered prayers that lingered in the still air. Her thoughts turned to the future, a vision of restoration and renewal. She imagined the church filled once again with warmth and laughter, a sanctuary where women like herself could find refuge and hope. The echoes of the past would guide her steps, grounding her in a mission that transcended time. Outside, the first stars appeared, twinkling faintly against the deepening sky. Mia wrapped her coat tighter around her and sat quietly on the cold stone steps, the history of the church and its forgotten purpose settling around her like a protective cloak. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges both practical and personal. But in the quiet heart of this sanctuary, a seed of hope had been planted. As she gazed upward, the fractured light of the stained glass caught the moonlight, scattering colors across her face. The church had stood through storms and silence, bearing witness to countless lives. Now, it awaited a new chapter, a promise of compassion reborn through the strength of a woman who had found refuge within its walls. Mia rose slowly, her resolve firming with each breath. The sanctuary story was hers to carry forward, a testament to the power of empathy and the enduring spirit of those who refuse to be forgotten. With one last glance at the worn altar, she stepped into the cool night, the weight of the past and the hope of the future intertwined within her heart. The days passed in a blur of cold drafts and aching muscles as Mia's due date edged closer. Each moment weighted with a mounting sense of urgency. The abandoned church, once a silent witness to forgotten lives, had become her refuge. A fragile sanctuary amid a world that seemed to close in around her. Yet, as the baby within her grew stronger, so too did the stark realities she faced. No healthcare, no support network, and resources stretched thin to the breaking point. Her body protested with every step, the strain of pregnancy manifesting in sharp pangs that radiated through her back and legs. Simple tasks became monumental efforts. The once faint fear of labor had morphed into a constant shadow, lurking just beyond her awareness. The chill that seeped through the cracked windows gnawed at her skin, and hunger was a persistent companion, reminding her of the precariousness of her situation. Despite it all, Mia refused to succumb to despair. Drawing on the strength she had found in Grace's story and the history embedded in the church's worn stones, Mia steeled herself against the mounting challenges. She wrapped herself tightly in the threadbare coat she had been carrying, layering scarves and blankets scavenged from discarded piles outside the building. Each layer was a small victory against the cold, a shield against the relentless bite of the night. Within the quiet walls, Mia found moments of solace, soft whispers of prayer, gentle caresses over her belly, and the steady rhythm of her own breathing. She spoke softly to the child she carried, words of love and promise, weaving a tapestry of hope amid uncertainty. The church, with its fractured stained glass and peeling paint, had become a sacred space where fear and hope intertwined. But the stark truth remained. She was alone. No family to call upon, no friends to visit or lend a hand. The isolation weighed heavily, a crushing solitude that threatened to overwhelm her. The prospect of labor without assistance was terrifying, and the absence of health care left her vulnerable to every risk and complication. Yet, amid the loneliness, Mia's determination grew. She knew she could not face the coming days without help. Recalling a name mentioned in one of Grace's letters, a volunteer midwife who had once worked with the women seeking refuge in the church, Mia resolved to reach out. Using the church's limited cell reception, she sent a tentative message, her fingers trembling as she typed, hoping against hope for a response. The wait was agonizing. Each day stretched endlessly, filled with aching limbs and restless nights. Her mind raced with fears of what might happen when labor began. Would the midwife come in time? Would she be strong enough to endure? The uncertainty was a heavy burden, but the thought of someone arriving, someone who understood, kindled a fragile flame of hope. In the meantime, Mia began to prepare as best she could. She cleared a small corner near the altar, sweeping away dust and debris to create a space soft enough for childbirth. She gathered blankets and old sheets she found tucked away in forgotten corners, layering them to cushion the cold stone beneath. Each task was a small act of defiance against the bleakness, a way to claim some measure of control in an uncontrollable situation. She also reached out quietly to a local women's shelter, using the limited phone signal to leave messages explaining her predicament. Though direct help seemed distant, the knowledge that someone else was aware of her situation offered a faint reassurance. The shelter's volunteers, she hoped, might be able to guide or assist her when the time came. As the days slipped by, Mia's strength was tested in ways she had never imagined. The physical toll of pregnancy was compounded by the emotional weight of isolation and fear. There were moments when tears spilled freely, when the cold seemed unbearable, when the silence of the church amplified her loneliness. But each time, she drew upon the stories of women like Grace, their courage a beacon that refused to be extinguished. In quiet moments, Mia found herself speaking aloud, sharing her fears and hopes with the empty church. She imagined Grace listening, a silent companion across time, offering comfort and understanding. The connection to the past became a lifeline, a source of fortitude that buoyed her through the darkest hours. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows lengthened across the floor, Mia's phone buzzed softly. With a shaking hand, she answered to hear a warm, reassuring voice on the other end. A volunteer midwife who had received her message and was willing to come. Relief flooded through her. A wave of gratitude mingled with renewed hope. The midwife's voice was calm and steady, guiding Mia through breathing exercises and offering advice to ease the discomfort. Though miles away, her presence was a balm to Mia's frayed nerves, a reminder that she was not entirely alone. They arranged for the midwife to meet her at the church when the time came, a promise that anchored Mia's resolve. That night, wrapped in layers of blankets, Mia lay near the altar, feeling the steady kicks of her unborn child. The church, once a place of silence and abandonment, now pulsed with quiet anticipation. Despite the hardships, a fragile hope took root. Hope that she could face what lay ahead, fortified by the strength of those who had come before and the kindness of those who would walk alongside her. As sleep claimed her in fitful waves, Mia whispered a promise to her child, that no matter the trials, they would find safety, love, and a future. In the heart of the forgotten church, amid shadows and light, a new chapter was beginning, a story of resilience, courage, and the enduring power of hope. The first sharp pang struck Mia's belly in the dead of night, a sudden wave of pain that took her breath away. She gasped, clutching the threadbare blanket wrapped around her as the intensity swelled, each contraction building relentlessly like thunder rolling across a stormy sky. Alone in the abandoned church, the shadows seemed to close in, but beneath the fear and pain, a quiet determination rooted her in the moment. This was the moment she had feared and awaited, a moment where courage would be her only companion. The cold stone floor beneath her was unforgiving, but Mia had prepared as best she could, the small corner near the altar, her fragile sanctuary. She shifted slowly, breathing deeply, trying to steady her racing heart. The ache in her back deepened, and sweat beaded on her brow despite the chill in the air. Waves of pain pulsed through her, each one a fierce reminder of the life growing within, a life she was determined to bring safely into the world. Minutes stretched into hours as she labored alone, the silence of the church broken only by her ragged breaths and the distant creak of the old wooden doors swaying in the night breeze. Fear gnawed at the edges of her resolve. But she clung to the stories of women like Grace, who had faced similar trials with quiet strength. The legacy of those who had come before became a lifeline, a whispered encouragement in the stillness. Just as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, a soft knock echoed through the empty nave. Mia's eyes fluttered open, and relief washed over her as the door creaked wider to reveal the volunteer midwife, her face calm and steady in the dim light. The midwife's presence was a balm to Mia's frayed nerves, a promise that she would not face this alone. With gentle hands, the midwife guided Mia through each contraction, her voice steady and reassuring. She moved with practiced grace, offering words of comfort and instruction as the hours unfolded. The church, once a place of silence and neglect, now pulsed with the raw intensity of new life. The stained glass windows caught the moonlight, casting fractured colors across the floor like a quiet blessing. Pain and hope intertwined as Mia labored, the midwife's steady presence a beacon amid the storm. Time seemed to blur, minutes folding into one another, the rhythm of birth both primal and sacred. Through the haze of pain, Mia found moments of clarity, her hand clutching the midwife's as she summoned the final reserves of strength. And then, a cry pierced the stillness, a fragile, urgent sound that filled the church with the undeniable proof of survival. Mia's tears flowed freely as she held her newborn close, the tiny body warm and alive against her skin. The midwife smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the profound miracle that had just unfolded in the quiet sanctuary. In the aftermath, the weight of fear lifted, replaced by a profound sense of relief and gratitude. Mia rocked the newborn gently, whispering promises of love and protection. The church, weathered and worn, had become a cradle for new beginnings, a place where despair had given way to hope. As dawn's first light filtered through the broken windows, Mia gazed down at her child, a symbol of resilience and the enduring power of life. The legacy of women like Grace lived on in this fragile new existence, a testament to courage across generations. In the heart of the forgotten church, amidst shadows and light, a bond was forged between past and present, mother and child, hope and survival. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden light through the shattered stained glass windows of the old church as Mia cradled her newborn daughter in her arms. The fragile infant stirred softly, wrapped in a faded blanket that had once belonged to Grace. Holding the child close, Mia felt a surge of purpose swell within her, a quiet resolve born from the trials she had endured and the legacy she had uncovered. The church, once a forgotten relic of neglect and silence, now hummed with a tentative life of its own. Mia had made the decision to restore the sanctuary, to transform this place of decay into a beacon of hope for pregnant women and mothers who, like her, faced hardship and isolation. It was a mission steeped in the stories of those who had come before. Grace and the countless women who had sought refuge within these walls. Word of Mia's story had begun to spread through the community, whispered among neighbors and shared in quiet conversations. Slowly, local volunteers emerged, people moved by her strength and the vision she carried. They arrived with tools and supplies, their hands ready to breathe life back into the crumbling building. Together, they cleared debris, patched broken windows, and scrubbed years of grime from the worn wooden pews. The work was arduous, but each hammer, strike, and brushstroke was a step toward reclaiming a sanctuary that had once served as a lifeline. The volunteers brought donations of food, blankets, and baby supplies, their generosity a balm to the wounds of poverty and loneliness that had marked Mia's journey. In this collective effort, a community began to take shape, one bound by compassion and the shared desire to uplift those in need. Inside the church, a small memorial took form, a modest plaque and a framed collection of Grace's letters and photographs. It was a tribute to the woman whose courage and kindness had laid the foundation for this revival. The memorial served as a reminder that the strength of women supporting women was a force that transcended time. Mia often found herself sitting quietly near the altar, watching as mothers and expectant women gathered in the space, their faces etched with stories of struggle, yet illuminated by hope. The church was becoming more than a building. It was a sanctuary where judgment gave way to understanding, where isolation was replaced by solidarity. The journey was far from over. Challenges remained, funding was limited, skepticism lingered in some corners, and Mia's own health required attention. Yet, the transformation unfolding within the church walls was undeniable. It was a testament to resilience, to the power of community, and to the enduring legacy of compassion. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the restored stained glass, casting vibrant patterns across the floor, Mia watched her daughter play beneath the windows. The child's laughter echoed softly, a melody of innocence and promise that filled the sanctuary. In that moment, Mia felt a profound connection to the past and an unshakable hope for the future. The church had become a place of healing and renewal, a beacon for those navigating the storms of poverty, abandonment, and fear. Mia's story, intertwined with Grace's, was a living testament to the strength found in vulnerability and the transformative power of kindness. As the day waned, Mia rose and stepped outside, the cool evening air brushing against her skin. She looked back at the church, its walls scarred but standing, its doors open wide, and knew that this was just the beginning. The sanctuary would continue to grow, sheltering lives and nurturing hope for generations to come. In the quiet that settled over the town, beneath a sky painted with twilight hues, Mia whispered a promise to herself and to her daughter, that they would carry forward the legacy of courage and compassion, ensuring that no woman would walk this path alone again. The morning light filtered gently through the newly restored stained glass windows, bathing the sanctuary in a kaleidoscope of colors that danced softly across the polished wooden floor. The once forgotten church, now vibrant and alive, hummed with the quiet energy of women and children gathered within its walls. Mia stood near the entrance, watching as expectant mothers and new parents moved through the space, their faces a mixture of hope and apprehension, relief and determination. This was no longer just a building. It was a sanctuary reborn, a place where compassion, support, and strength converged to break the cycles of poverty and isolation that had haunted so many lives. The church offered counseling, resources, and a community bound by shared experience and unwavering empathy. It was a beacon for those who had once felt invisible, a refuge where their stories were honored and their futures nurtured. Mia's gaze settled on her daughter, now toddling near the restored altar, her laughter mingling with the soft murmur of conversation and the gentle footsteps of volunteers and visitors. The child was a living testament to the journey that had brought them here. A journey marked by hardship, resilience, and the transformative power of hope. Mia felt a swell of pride and gratitude, the weight of past struggles softened by the promise of new beginnings. The memorial to Grace, displayed prominently near the entrance, served as a constant reminder of the legacy that had paved the way for this renewal. The letters, photographs, and embroidered cloth told the story of a woman whose quiet courage had ignited a flame that refused to be extinguished. Visitors often paused there, tracing the faded ink and worn fabric, connecting with the history that had inspired this sanctuary's rebirth. Community members, once strangers, now stood united in purpose. Volunteers offered their time and skills, local businesses contributed resources, and women who had once sought refuge here now returned as mentors and advocates. The church had become a living, breathing testament to the strength found in solidarity, a place where healing and growth flourished side by side. Mia often reflected on the incredible transformation, not just of the church, but of herself. From a woman facing despair and isolation, she had become a leader, a guardian of hope, and a catalyst for change. The journey had been fraught with fear and uncertainty, but it had also been illuminated by unexpected kindness and the enduring bonds forged across generations. As she watched her daughter explore the sanctuary, Mia felt a profound connection to the past and a deep responsibility toward the future. The church was more than a refuge. It was a promise that no woman, no child, would ever have to face hardship alone again. It was a space where stories were heard, where wounds could begin to heal, and where the seeds of resilience were sown. The sun climbed higher, casting warm light through the vibrant windows, and Mia stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The town bustled around her, its streets alive with the rhythms of daily life. Yet here, in this sacred space, a different kind of life thrived, one rooted in compassion, community, and the unwavering belief in second chances. She whispered a silent vow to herself and to the generations of women who had come before and those yet to come, to keep this sanctuary open, to nurture its mission, and to honor the legacy of courage and kindness that had made it possible. The path ahead would hold new challenges, but Mia faced them with a heart fortified by hope and a spirit unbroken. As the day unfolded, the church welcomed another group of women seeking support, their stories weaving into the tapestry of resilience that filled the air. Mia joined them, offering a smile, a listening ear, and the warmth of shared understanding. In this place, beneath the colorful glow of stained glass, lives were being rewritten. Stories transformed from despair to empowerment. The sanctuary stood as a testament to the power of compassion, a beacon shining brightly in a world too often shadowed by hardship. Through the strength of community and the legacy of those who refused to be forgotten, it had become a haven where hope was not just a fleeting dream, but a lived reality, one that would endure for generations to come.